My name is Vanessa. I'm 28, and for as long as I've had memories to replay, classic cars have been the reel that runs in the background. Not the shiny new ones with touchscreen everything, but the steel and soul kind, machines that smell like gasoline and leather, that rumble more like a heartbeat than a motor. The crown jewel, the one that lived in my head for years, was a 1969 Corvette Stingray in rally red. I promised that car to myself when I was 7. I promised it again at 12. I promised it silently on nights I was too tired to say anything out loud. And after 5 ruthless years of 70-hour weeks, skipped birthdays, packed lunches, and telling myself, not yet, every time I passed a store window, I finally bought it. If this were a fair world, the hard part would have ended there. If this were a fair world, I would not be opening a story with a confession that when I came back from a career-defining trip, I walked into my parents' house, asked where my car was, and my mother, my own mother, smiled in that brittle way and said, "Thanks to your car, our daughter is finally living a little. Stay with me. You're going to want to see how this turns. And before we dive, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and tap subscribe if anyone in your family has ever acted like your things were a communal pantry." This is one of those stories that makes you pick a side. The first time I touched a torque wrench, it was too heavy for my hands. My grandfather, everyone called him Nessie for reasons no one could explain, lifted it with me anyway. Saturday mornings were our ritual. Other kids stayed in pajamas and watched cartoons. I climbed into his faded pickup that sounded like it cleared its throat before starting. The garage door would rattle up and the air would change. The warm smell of oil, the metallic cool of tools, sunlight through dusty windows making slow-motion glitter out of floating sawdust. He kept project cars at various stages of someday. A sunburned Mustang with a mismatched door, an old Chevy whose hood was a constellation of hammered dents, shelves stacked with carburetors that looked like silver insects. He'd show me how to listen to an engine with more than just ears. "Feel the vibration in your ribs," he'd say, touching his chest. Then he'd hand me a rag and make me part of the ritual. I wasn't a spectator in that garage. I belonged. One morning he pulled a gray cover back the way you might unveil a sculpture. Red, but not candy red. Deeper, richer, with the kind of gloss that turned the light itself into curves. The Stingray. Even the word felt fast. He turned the key and the world hummed. I can still feel that thrum in my sternum. I remember looking at my reflection on the hood. A small girl with hair in her face and eyes that refused to blink. I didn't say much, but I made a vow and it stuck to me like grease. Someday. That one. My home was different. My mom believed in piano recitals and tights that didn't snag. My dad believed in sensible schedules and quiet children. They weren't cruel, just calibrated to a frequency I didn't tune to. When I came home with crescents of oil above my cuticles, my mother would sigh the way people sigh at a missed bus. "Why not ballet, Vanessa? Or painting?" Dad didn't scold. He did something worse. He smiled in that patronizing way that says, "This phase will pass." Then there was my sister Heather. 4 years younger, always in our parents' spotlight without asking to be. She was the dancer, the pretty picture, the one whose smallest disappointments charged the whole house with mission urgency. She asked for lessons. She got a studio with the word academy in it. I asked for auto shop. I got a conversation about budgets and priorities. She got glittering parties with pastel cakes. I got carefully cut slices at the kitchen table and a card filled with good intentions. I loved her. I also learned early that love doesn't stop certain math from adding up. College was my proof I could write my own equation. I moved to Chicago with 2 duffel bags and a calendar that looked like a dare. I studied finance because numbers felt clean in a way people didn't, and I took 3 part-time jobs because rent doesn't care about your GPA. I packed my lunch so consistently that grocery store clerks knew me by the hummus brand I bought. I chased scholarships like they were game show prizes. When I graduated summa, I attended the ceremony and then went to work the same afternoon because the first rule of the Stingray Fund was that it never slept. At the investment bank, I learned how to live inside fluorescent light and make a life anyway. Colleagues treated themselves to watches that chimed when you lifted your wrist. I watched my savings app grow in little green steps. They took island vacations. I took a bus to a swap meet to talk myself out of buying a set of vintage gauges I didn't need. I looked for my car the way some people look for a face in a crowd they know they'll recognize when they see it. Years of stalking forums, setting alerts, going to auctions just to learn the rhythm of bidding. Then I found her. A rally red '69 Stingray with the lines that made my childhood vow sharpen into certainty. The seller was a collector in Wisconsin, finning a fleet that made me dizzy even in photos. The asking price, $85,000. I had it. Every single dollar took a shape and a sound and a memory. Nights I slept in a chair at my desk, mornings I walked to save a bus fare, holidays I said, I'll come next year. I wired the money with hands that trembled and drove home with wet cheeks and sun in my eyes. I talked to my grandfather the whole way. We did it, I told the empty seat. We kept the promise. Owning the car changed nothing and everything. My alarm still went off before the streetlights switched off. But every clear Saturday I'd take her out and the city felt different, like it owed me a tiny bow. I didn't race her. I listened. I learned her moods. I kept her garaged under a cover that fit like a bespoke coat. In winter I fed her battery tender cables like ivy. People will say, it's just a car, the way they say, it's just a ring, or, it's just a house. Those sentences are never about the object. They are about the hours you traded to buy it, the person you had to be to keep choosing it, the link it gives you to who you promised you'd become. James understood that. We met the way car people meet. Not with small talk but with a question about a trim piece. He had a 2004 replica that wore the '69 body like a well-made costume, convincing at a glance, different under the skin. He wasn't precious about it, but he was respectful. He noticed how I checked my tire sidewalls when I parked. He noticed how I waited a beat after turning the key, as if I were letting the car answer whether today was a good day to be driven. He didn't make fun of me for standing in the garage with a cup of coffee and just looking. He did it too. When you find someone who mirrors your weird, you don't squander it. If you're wondering when this becomes a story you tell on the internet and strangers pick sides, it starts in a glass office 26 floors up. My boss, Veronica, had a view that made the river look obedient. She didn't call me in often, and when she did, it meant plates were shifting. "How's your Japanese?" she asked, flipping a pen between fingers that never dropped anything. I said conversational because rusty but hungry wasn't a professional answer. She nodded once. "Pack a bag. Patterson's expanding in Asia. They want someone who understands both sides of the handshake. You're leading the team in Tokyo. 3 weeks." I said thank you, and I won't let you down, and everything you say when the elevator to the next floor of your life opens. On the walk back to my desk, the first ridiculous thought I had was about my car. 3 weeks is 21 days of not watching. Chicago had been elbowed by a cluster of garage break-ins lately, the kind where the city feeds you a press conference about patrols and you still sleep lighter. I considered a climate-controlled storage facility that charged like a boutique hotel. I considered letting James keep it at his place, which was secure enough but not fortress secure. Then the idea arrived like a neat answer in a column of messy math. My parents' garage in Glenview. Quiet street. Lights that worked. A lock that hadn't been picked since forever. Despite the history between us, they'd never touched the Corvette without asking. Right? That Thursday evening I drove out, the sky the color of a bruised peach. My dad paused halfway through mowing the lawn. He wiped his forehead with the back of his arm and approached like he was greeting an old friend. "Still a beauty," he said softly, fingertips hovering over the hood without quite touching. "Your granddad would be loud about this." My mother came to the door with a towel over her shoulder and that small, stretched smile she saved for moments that were not on her list but tried to be gracious about anyway. I explained Tokyo. I explained 3 weeks. I explained that nothing would make me feel safer than knowing the car was under their roof, but that safe came with rules. Start her once a week. 15 minutes of idle. Do not drive her. Use the fitted cover. Do not let anyone else lay a hand on her. My dad nodded at first and then with tighter lines between his eyebrows. "Vanessa, I do know how to look after a car," he said. "I will treat it like glass." I smiled and pretended my chest wasn't still tight. Heather joined us for dinner. She had been at her first real job for 2 months and carried the kind of exhaustion you get when you're learning that emails don't respect your lunch break. She poked at her salad like it had offended her. "Everyone's planning a Mediterranean cruise," she announced, scrolling through photos that showed bronzed legs and turquoise water and drinks in glasses big enough to swim in. "I can't go. I can barely pay rent. Life is a joke." My mom made the noises moms make when they want to gift wrap the world. My dad talked about timing. I thought about how often I had walked past a water fountain and decided thirst was a luxury. Back in the driveway, James and I made the plan that would end up being the only reason I didn't dissolve on my parents' carpet 3 weeks later. Let's swap, he said. Mine will fool a stranger at a glance. Yours can live at my place with the cameras and the good locks. Your folks won't know. There's no risk to your actual baby. I stared at the 2 cars parked nose to nose like twins in different moods. You sure? I asked. Positive, he said. It's the right kind of paranoid. We did it. Covers off, covers on, keys traded, hugs that held a beat longer than usual. Tokyo was a blur of glass and light and meetings that required 2 kinds of bow. Patterson signed. 12 million in fees and a kind of congratulations from Veronica that felt like a hand at my back pushing me up a stair. My phone lit up with Heather's stories. Oceans, sunsets, clinking glasses. My mother's texts got whimsical. We have a surprise for you when you get home, she wrote one night. I liked the message and pictured a cake with tiny Japanese flags stuck in it. I pictured balloons from the party store. I did not picture what the surprise actually was because if I had, I would have booked a return flight for the next morning and come home breathing fire. I landed at O'Hare on a Tuesday at 2:15 p.m., a time of day that feels politely bright. Customs luggage taxi. I texted James, 10 minutes. He wrote back, on my way. The driver turned onto my parents' street and my body did that tiny anticipatory lean people do when they're almost home. Then my stomach dropped in that way that makes your mouth flood with metallic saliva. The garage door was up. My dad's sedan was inside. My mom's SUV was inside. The space where a red Corvette should have been was a negative, a cutout, a missing tooth. I tried something fragile like denial. Maybe they moved it. Maybe it's at the back with the lawn chairs. Maybe. I paid the driver, rolled my suitcase up the walk and knocked even though I never knock. My mother opened the door with arms already out for a hug, and I stepped into it like a person falling into a network of safety nets and finding instead a floor made of glass. How was your flight? She asked, and there was a brightness in her voice that didn't agree with the tightness in her jaw. Fine, I said, scanning over her shoulder as if I might see through walls. Where's my car? Something small shifted in her face, like a crack traveling through glaze. She didn't answer. She guided me in with a hand on my shoulder, and I let her because I didn't know what else to do except start running in circles around the house like a child. My dad was in his recliner with a newspaper held up in a way no one holds a newspaper when they are reading it. Dad, I said evenly, where is my Corvette? He lowered the paper and in the pause that followed, a whole roomful of air got heavy. Well, he began, the word landing wrong, too bright. Something came up while you were gone. People talk about feeling a knot in the stomach. This felt like someone was cinching a strap around my ribs. What does something mean? I said, where's the car? My mother lifted her chin the way she does when she's about to pretend her opinion is a fact. Heather needed help, she said like she was explaining a charitable donation. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity came up. Her friends were going on a cruise. She's been under such pressure. The poor thing. What does that have to do with my car? I asked. My voice had a new edge to it even I hadn't heard before. She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me. Heather on a ship deck in a sundress, Heather's sunglasses catching a slice of sun, Heather's grin filling the frame with effortless entitlement. My mom smiled, but it was a smile stripped for parts, all teeth and no heart. Thanks to your car, she said, our daughter is finally getting a chance to breathe, to make connections, to live a little. There are moments you can feel your body reach for a choice. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the nearest object. I could have gone quiet and never made another sound. What I did was whisper. You sold my car. I heard the words more than I felt them leave my mouth. Now, Vanessa, my dad said, palms up as if he were calming a skittish animal. Try to understand. Heather has been very low. She's been struggling. All her friends were going. She couldn't be left out. It would have crushed her. My laugh came out wrong, like a tire briefly leaving the road and slapping back onto it. So you sold my car. You make good money, my mother said with the confidence of someone who has never filed a tax return herself. You can get another one. You always land on your feet. Your sister needed this. Think about networking. Think about the long term. Think about forgery, I said. Think about theft. The title is in my name. You had no right. We told the buyer you had authorized us, my dad said, and the shame dropped his gaze. We were just moving things along. There was urgency. Urgency. The word did something to me. It reached back into years of carefully balanced plates and tapped them with a chopstick. I felt heat crawl up my neck and sit in my cheeks. How much? I asked. They looked at each other. 50, my dad said finally. The number hit me like cold water. 50. I repeated it because if I didn't, I would have to scream. You sold a car worth $85,000 for 50? Did you even open a browser? Did you type a single word into a search bar? You let someone else tell you what my car was worth and you nodded. He said it was fair, Dad muttered. We needed to move before you got home. It was all very fast. Before I got home, I said slowly as if I were translating. So the plan was to make it irreversible before the person who actually owns the car could stop you. Interesting strategy. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. James, just pulled up. Where's the Stingray? My eyes slid to my parents. I should remember the precise instant a new thread of reality began to unspool, but all I remember is a tiny click in my head like a latch opening. I looked at my mother's face, the brittle triumph of it, and something in me, some instinct that was smarter than the part currently boiling, whispered wait. I turned the phone over in my hand and suddenly saw the whole chessboard. The swap. James's replica in their garage for 3 weeks. My car 2 neighborhoods away under cameras and a lock that bit my fingers if I wasn't careful with the key. The collector from Indiana, who had admired a car that wasn't what he thought it was. My parents proudly quick-selling something they didn't own. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It felt like pressure leaving a pipe that had been groaning for days. My mother straightened. What's funny? She demanded, offended that the scene she had choreographed was not landing with the right applause. You didn't sell my car, I said softly, and for the first time that afternoon, I tasted relief like cool water. You sold something that wasn't mine to sell. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? We saw you park it here. You saw a red 69 Stingray body, I said. You didn't see the VIN. You didn't see the year under the costume. I stepped outside to wave James in because I wanted him standing beside me when I said it. He joined me in the living room, eyes scanning faces, reading the emotional map in seconds. I kept my gaze on my parents. You remember James, right? Of course, my mother said sharply. Vanessa, be serious. I am being serious, I said. The car you sold wasn't mine. It was his. The color drained from both of their faces the way sky drains just before a storm. My dad opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's impossible, he said. It looked exactly like. That's the point, James said, voice level but edged. Mine was built to look like a 69. It is not one. It's worth around 30. Not 85. You didn't just sell your daughter's property without permission. You sold a stranger's property without permission. My mother lowered herself into a chair like her knees had politely stopped cooperating. We could go to jail, she whispered, the words the first honest thing she had said all day. And that, I said quietly, is the first accurate sentence anyone has spoken since I walked through the door. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered because my life had already turned into the kind of day where you say yes to anything if it might give you leverage. Is this Vanessa Miller? A man asked, voice smooth like a voiceover for a financial ad. Yes. This is Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette through your parents, supposedly on your behalf. There's a problem with the title. I'm not sure what's going on, but something isn't adding up. I looked at my parents. They looked back with the wide eyes of people who have just learned gravity applies to them too. Mr. Donovan, I said, steadying my voice. There has been a misunderstanding. Give me 1 hour and I'll call you back with clarity. I hung up and turned the phone face down on the table like a judge setting down a gavel. My mother started to cry in the way that used to arrest me, the kind of sobbing that demanded the room reorganize itself around her feelings. It didn't land the same anymore. We didn't know, she said. How were we supposed to? You were supposed to ask, I said. You were supposed to respect a boundary you didn't draw yourselves. You were supposed to stop at the edge of your own names. What do you want us to do? My dad asked James without looking at me because that is what guilt does. It looks for the authority it has offended. First, James said, you're going to give me the buyer's information. Then you're going to figure out how to get $50,000 back into his account plus enough to cover his trouble. Then you're going to apologize in writing with a notary stamp big enough to be seen from space. We don't have 50, my dad said, voice small. We just put money into the kitchen. Then you will remortgage, or you will sell the kitchen to someone who likes gray cabinets, or your daughter will sell whatever jewelry you've convinced yourselves should be insured before her daughter's trust, I said, surprising even myself with the steel in my tone. I'm not sending you to prison today, but I'm not cushioning you from what prison feels like when it breathes on your neck. They found the folder. People like my parents always have a folder. Inside were forged signatures that looked like someone had traced my name while their hand shook, a bill of sale with a VIN that didn't match the car it was supposed to describe, and a printed email thread so full of sent from my iPhone typos it read like a confession. I flipped through the papers while my mother made wet noises and my father stared at the carpet like it might offer up forgiveness if he stared hard enough. This is bad, James said quietly, leaning over my shoulder. It's not just wrong. It's sloppy. A text pinged. Heather. OMG, the water is so blue. You guys have to see this. I might never come back, winking face Wong. I stared at the screen and felt heat turn to something else. Something clearer. Call her, I told my mother. Yow. She won't answer, my mom said, blowing her nose into a paper napkin like a teenager. She's with friends. There's music. Then leave her a message, I said. Tell her the cruise she is on is floating on stolen money and that the people she loves are about to learn the legal difference between helping and felony. Tell her to dock at the next port and get on a plane. You can't talk to her like, my mother began. I can, I said, and I just did. James's phone buzzed. Alicia can see us at 2, he said. Alicia is a lawyer whose business card lives in my wallet because life is a series of days when you don't need a lawyer followed by a day when you really, really do. Good, I said. We'll get the buyer his money. We'll get your car back. And then we're drawing a map for this family with thick black lines and labels big enough for the visually impaired. I looked at my parents. There will be rules. You will follow them. They nodded like students who had finally realized the pop quiz was real. I stepped outside with James while my parents whispered about equity and loans and whether gold could be converted to cash without too much embarrassment. In the bright, ordinary air of my childhood street, I let my head fall onto James's shoulder for a second. Thank you, I said, and the words were inadequate. You don't have to thank me for standing next to you, he said. That's what next to you is for. Back inside, my parents had their checkbook out as if checks could make time behave. My dad had found the buyer's number and written it on the back of an envelope along with a plan that had more hope than math in it. We can get 40, he said. Maybe. By Friday. Then 10 as soon as possible. We'll make it right. You'll make it right now, James said. He's not a charity. And neither am I. My mother's face folded in on itself like paper. We'll sell my rings, she said at last, the words scraped out of somewhere she didn't like to visit. We'll talk to the bank today. Good, I said. And then we're going to talk about something you should have learned long before now. Family isn't a password that lets you enter other people's lives and take what you want. My phone lit again. Uncle George, my grandfather's brother, the only person in our extended family who had ever spoken to me like I was an adult when I was a kid. I answered. Nessie would have read them the manual, he said after I finished the story, his voice half laugh, half growl. Chapter 1. Don't steal what isn't yours. Chapter 2. When you mess up, fix it like you mean it. Come for dinner sometime, I said, surprising myself. After this is less on fire. Maybe we'll talk about your old truck. I'll bring the title, he said. You bring the rules. One more thing before I press the day back into motion. I opened the camera on my phone and took a photo of my face. Eyes rimmed in that kind of tired you don't sleep off, jaw set in a new line I hadn't seen before. I saved it. Not for the internet. For me. To remember the day I learned that the value of what you love isn't just measured in dollars or miles or appraisal sheets. It's measured in whether you stand up when people, even people who share your last name, try to convince you that your no is negotiable. If you're still with me, breathe. We're not done. I'm going to tell you exactly how we unwound a sale that never should have happened, how a buyer found out he hadn't bought what he thought he bought, how a notarized apology can feel both petty and perfect, and how a family learns the shape of a real boundary for the first time. Make sure you've hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest, and tell me below if you've ever had to teach your own people the difference between being close and being careless. Because that's where this is heading. Consequences with compassion, and the kind of line you paint once and never let anyone step over again. When I said the words, "You didn't sell my car. You sold his." The air inside the living room seemed to tilt. My father's lips moved without sound, a fish pulled from water. My mother's brows climbed, then collapsed, and the practiced smile she'd been wearing for my homecoming buckled at the corners. James didn't posture or raise his voice. He only shifted his weight, arms folded, gaze steady, like a mechanic who already knows what's wrong under the hood and is waiting for the owner to accept it. "You're being ridiculous," my mother said too quickly. "We watched you drive it into the garage. We saw it with our own eyes." "You saw a red 69 body and the Stingray script," I answered. "You didn't see the VIN. You didn't see the year stamped where it matters. The car you sold isn't mine. It's James's replica. Built in 2004 to look like a 69, not be one." "That's impossible," my father muttered. "It was identical." "That was the point," James said evenly. "Convincing at a glance. Different under the skin. Mine is worth around 30. You took 50. You forged her signature and pushed a bill of sale with a wrong VIN. If the buyer goes to an attorney, this won't be a family disagreement. It'll be a docket number." My mother sat down as if a chair had appeared beneath her. "We could go to prison," she whispered, mascara already shadowing beneath her eyes, voice small in a way I'd never heard. "Yes," James said. "You could." He didn't say it to scare them. He said it like a fact read off a spec sheet. "I watched my parents the way you watch strangers who happen to own your childhood photos." For the first time, the word family felt like a label slapped onto two people who had simply never had to test whether they respected the word no. "You thought you could sell a car you didn't own and I'd forgive it because we share last names?" I asked softly. "Family isn't diplomatic immunity." My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered and a careful voice introduced itself. "Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette through your parents. Your signature is on the paperwork. The title office is flagging the VIN. Something is wrong." My parents went pale in unison. Kept my tone controlled. "Mr. Donovan, there's been a misunderstanding. Give me an hour. I'll call you with clarity." I hung up and set the phone face down like a gavel. "Buyer's information. Now." My father moved with the stiff caution of a man waking from anesthesia and opened a desk drawer. Of course there was a folder. People who believe they are tidy about their messes always have a folder. Inside, a shaky imitation of my signature, a printed email thread with "We have authorization" typed like a talisman, a bill of sale with a mismatched VIN, a bank receipt that might as well have said, "We did this fast so we wouldn't get caught." James skimmed, jaw tightening. "This is beyond bad. If Donovan shows this to a prosecutor, they won't need to squint." My mother clutched a crumpled tissue. "What do we do?" Her voice reached for the old choreography, crying as leverage, but the room didn't move toward her the way it used to. "You refund him," I said. 50,000 plus damages. And you do it before he calls a lawyer." "We don't have that," my father said, eyes glassy. "Not after the kitchen. We can maybe get 40 by Friday." "Not enough," James said. "He'll want every cent in compensation for his trouble. If he files, the conversation ends and the system begins. That's not where you want to be." Heather's latest post lit my screen. Sundress, sunglasses, caption about Mediterranean magic. The comment section. Hearts, clinking glass emojis. "You deserve it." My stomach lurched. "Call her," I said to my mother. "Tell her the cruise ends now. Next port, next flight." "She's finally having fun," my mother protested, voice going high. "She's been under such pressure." "Pressure," I said, my temper catching like a match. "I worked 70-hour weeks for 5 years and made a promise to a 7-year-old version of myself that I kept alone. You created this. You fix it." James touched my shoulder with the lightest pressure. "Alicia can see us at 2, he said, thumb already gliding over his screen. "We're bringing the folder." On the front step, the day had the nerve to be beautiful. A neighbor walked a dog that wagged at everyone as if the world were uncomplicated. "This isn't your job," I told James quietly. "Standing next to you is my job," he said. "And this is next to you." Alicia's office had city views and the sort of tidy desk that makes guilty people confess. She listened. She took notes. She didn't interrupt to gasp or chastise. She let the story arrive in order. When we finished, she set her pen down and laced her fingers. Here's the unvarnished version, she said. Your parents are exposed on theft, forgery, and wire fraud. Even with no priors, a prosecutor could make an example. Your best move is speed. Full restitution to the buyer and a civil settlement with James. If the buyer's made whole and no one lodges a criminal complaint, this likely stays private. What about intent? My father asked weakly, as if the word might rescue him like a flotation device. Alicia didn't blink. You forged a signature. You presented a bill of sale with a VIN that doesn't match the vehicle. That's intent in practice. Don't waste time on moral debates. Solve the practical problem. How much? I asked. 55 minimum, she said. 50 back to Donovan. 5 for his expenses and time. He may ask for more. Get the money. Today if you can. And draft a notarized apology and non-interference agreement. If this ever happens again, you want terms in writing. My mother made a sound like a hatch ceiling. We can't get that kind of money in a day. You can get some, Alicia said. Home equity, jury, family help. Then you negotiate the rest with a deadline. We left with a plan. On the sidewalk, horns layered over each other like irritations. I dialed the satellite number Heather had texted us, just in case. She answered on the third ring, laughter and music a bright smear in the background. Nessa, you would not believe the water. Get off the ship at the next port, I said. Fly home. What? Don't be dramatic. Mom said you make plenty. You can get another. It wasn't my car, I cut in. It was James's. Forged signature. Wrong VIN. Wire transfer. 3 felonies before lunch. If Donovan calls the police, Mom and Dad will be arrested. Does that still sound like "don't be dramatic" to you? The silence didn't feel like a connection problem. It felt like comprehension tiptoeing in. That can't be real, she said smaller. They were helping. Family helps family. Family respects boundaries, I said. Ticket. Next port. 10,000 from your savings by tomorrow. You're not a spectator in this mess. You benefited. I don't have. You do, I said. You bragged about it at Thanksgiving. I didn't wait for the wounded noise she always made when reality refused to bend. Text me your flight. I hung up, breathed, and braced for the next call. Aunt Sylvia right on cue with a voice like a courtroom in zero facts. Your mother is inconsolable, she began. How could you threaten jail over a car? Over a felony, I corrected calmly. Plural. If you call to lecture me, save it. If you call to contribute to the refund, I'll text wiring instructions. He sputtered. I ended the call. Sometimes boundaries are a red line. Sometimes they're a dial tone. We met Donovan at a cafe halfway to Indiana that tried hard to look like it had been there for 100 years. He arrived with a folder thicker than my parents and eyes that told you he'd never liked being made a fool of. He didn't shake hands. Saturday, I took that car to a mechanic this morning, he said without preface. You know what he told me? It's a costume. It's a replica, James said, not flinching. Wine. Donovan slid a copy of the bill of sale across the table, tapping the VIN with one finger. I know the difference between a 1 and a 7. Your parents didn't. They also didn't know how to imitate a signature. My lawyer circled the shakes. We're returning your money, I said. 50 plus 5 for your time and costs. His eyes narrowed. I paid to trailer it to my mechanic. I paid for a day of my life I won't get back. I've already told my insurance to expect the car. I'm not interested in being charitable. We'll add 1,200, James said before I could answer. Donovan's gaze flicked to him, recalibrating. 56.2, he said. Wire. Not cashier's check. 72 hours. You'll get the car when my bank says it's there. Done, I said. He stared a second longer, then nodded once. I'll email wiring instructions. He stood, the meeting over not with warmth but with a rule observed. I texted my parents from the parking lot. Amount, deadline, non-negotiable. The reply came fast, my father's punctuation frantic. Bank. Going now. We drove straight to their branch and for a moment I nearly laughed. How ordinary the carpet was, how helpful the posters about achieving dreams, How many people in line were probably solving problems that felt like the end of the world to them? The branch manager, a man with a tie printed in tiny anchors, listened, then walked my parents through a home equity line. Approved, but the funds wouldn't be ready for 3 business days. The wire needed to go sooner. Rings, my mother said, a small sound, hand moving to a finger already bare because she knew. My grandmother's set. The consignment boutique on Maple can move them fast. We'll need 40 from the line, my father said, voice sanded down, 10 from Heather, 6 from the rings. We can do 6, right? He looked at the manager the way you look at a judge. You can do 6 if the buyer is hungry, the manager said kindly. Kindness is sometimes worse than scorn. It makes the truth gentle and therefore harder to push away. The consignment shop required an appointment, a magnifying loupe, and 2 signatures on a form that translated sentiment into percentages. 30% commission if it moved within a week. 40 if priced aggressively. My mother signed with a tremor and left the case on the counter like she was leaving a small animal to be euthanized. Outside, she leaned on the brick and let herself cry without theatrics. For the first time all day, the tears were honest. Heather's text came at 2 a.m. my time. A photo of a boarding pass, a crying emoji, then, "I'm sorry," typed the way you type fine. I didn't respond. Sorry is a promissory note until it's paid. At 9 a.m., I sat with James and Alicia at her conference table drafting the documents that would stitch the hole if not fix the fabric. A mutual non-interference and acknowledgement of wrongdoing, written so plainly even a future argument couldn't bend it. My parents admitting the sale, the forgery, the lack of authority. Agreeing to restitution, fees, and the cost of Donovan's trailer and mechanic. Promising never to access or manage any property titled to me or James without explicit written consent. Agreeing that any breach would trigger an automatic confession of judgment for a sum that would make them feel heartbeats in their gums. It felt petty and perfect. It's ugly, my father said when he read it. It's accurate, I said. He initialed every page, pen scratching like a tiny apology. Heather arrived from the airport with a ponytail and a face scrubbed raw from crying in public. She stood in my doorway and didn't fling herself into my arms as she would have before. I withdrew the 10, she said, holding out the receipt like an offering. It's a lot. I took it without softening. So is the ocean, I said. She flinched and nodded. I'll sell the bag, she added suddenly, voice wavering. The one Mom bought me for graduation. I don't even like it. It feels like it belongs to someone who didn't earn it. That was the first true thing she'd said in months. We wired 40 from the line as soon as the bank released the first tranche. The rings moved faster than anyone expected. Someone who loved another someone enough to pay for history. 6-2 landed by noon. Heather's 10 appeared with a transfer note that read, "I'll do better." And I let my thumb rest there a second before I wrote the wire details to Donovan. 56-2 reference number, screenshot, timestamp. He replied with a single sentence. I'll release the car at 3 p.m. at my mechanic's lot. James and I drove out. Donovan was there with a set of keys and a clipboard. He wasn't gracious. He didn't need to be. He walked us around the car, methodical. A smudge on the passenger door that could have been a knee. A scuff on the rear bumper that might have been there before. I didn't drive it, he said. I moved it 20 feet. His mechanic nodded. James signed the receipt, wrote returned in substantially same condition, because that phrase saves arguments, and we took the replica home. The engine sounded relieved, like a dog recognizing its person. At 4 in Alicia's conference room again, a notary watched my parents sign the apology. The stamp thumped paper with a sound that felt heavier than its size. My mother swallowed hard and said, James, I am sorry. It wasn't a performance. Cost her. James nodded like a man closing a hood. Boundaries, he said. We're not arguing about them anymore. That night in my apartment we held what I refused to call a family meeting, because I hate the way that phrase makes adults sound like toddlers. We called it what it was, a reset. I put a pot of coffee on the table not because anyone needed caffeine but because holding a mug keeps hands from doing stupid things. I took out a single sheet of paper with 8 bullet points. No legalese, just rules. You ask before you touch. You don't ask if you already did. You don't buy favors with guilt. You don't spend other people's money in your head. If you mess up, you fix it in full and fast. If you're told no, you hear no, not convince me. If you're drowning, you say help, not Give me your life raft and your house and your boat. If you forget any of this, reread from the top. My dad asked, almost shyly, if he could have a copy to put on the fridge. I said no. Put it in your wallet, I told him. The fridge is for food. Wallets are for things you shouldn't forget. Heather pulled her knees up on my couch like she used to do when she was 12 and scared of thunder. I knew it was wrong, she admitted in a voice that sounded like a found object. I knew when I said, I can't be the only one not going, that I was asking for more than a ticket. I just didn't think it would get here. She gestured at the papers. I'm so tired of being the person everyone rearranges furniture for. Then stop being her, I said. You can. It's a choice. I don't know how, she said. You start small, James offered. You return the bag. You stop posting pictures of a life you can't afford. You apologize without words like, but, and. You get comfortable being bored because bored is what saving looks like some days. My mother bristled, then forced herself to unclench. The therapy appointment I'd scheduled for Saturday glowed on the family calendar like a dare. We'll go, she said. All of us. She glanced at my father as if checking whether the word all included him. It did. He squeezed her hand. I'll go, he echoed. My phone buzzed. Veronica. Congratulations again, her text began. Patterson is thrilled. Call me tomorrow. We should discuss next steps. I stared at the screen and felt something sideways in my chest. Joy and exhaustion and a question that looked like a road at night. Next steps meant travel again. Travel meant where do I put the car? This time I knew the answer and it wasn't my parents' garage. At 10 p.m., I walked downstairs with the replica's keys and stood beside James as he eased it into his garage. We didn't say much. Some silences are earned. Then we drove to the storage facility with cameras that never blink and a manager who wears a tie at midnight. I signed a contract for a climate-controlled unit whose monthly price made me wince, and then opened the door to the space that would now be my car's second home when I couldn't be her first. The overhead light clicked on. The concrete didn't care about my day. We rolled my Stingray inside and took the cover off because I needed to see her in this new place and give my 7-year-old self a chance to calm down. I ran 2 fingers along the fender line like a promise. I'm not leaving you with people who haven't earned you again, I whispered. Felt silly and completely right. Back home, the apartment smelled like coffee and paperwork. My parents had gone, clutching their copy of the agreement as if it were both punishment and permission. Heather had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket kicked to her ankles. I tucked it around her and stood there a minute, remembering the way she used to sleep with her fists up near her face, ready to dream fight anything that tried her. Somewhere along the line she had stopped fighting the right things. Maybe this was the swing back. Before I went to bed, I filmed a short on my phone for the channel because I knew I'd be asked where I'd been for 3 weeks and I prefer telling my own story before the comments decide it. I didn't name names. I didn't air dirty laundry for sport. I looked into the lens and said, have you ever had someone cross a line so hard it left grooves? Did you let it slide because they were family? Or did you draw the line darker? I drew it darker. It's messy and necessary. If you've ever had to protect something you worked years for, tell me where you're watching from, hit subscribe so you catch the last part of this, and remember, no is a complete sentence. I posted it and shut my phone off. It buzzed anyway because phones always do when you pretend you're above caring. Morning arrived looking like a clean sheet of paper. It always does, even after days when you wrote over the margins. My dad texted a photo of the kitchen, empty ring dishes, a stack of recipe cards, a calendar with the therapy appointment circled 3 times, and below it he added, we're going. My mother sent a separate message that was 3 words and a punctuation mark. I am learning. Not, I will. Present tense. It made something unclench between my ribs. In the afternoon, Uncle George called. I heard, he said without preamble. Your grandfather would have given them a manual and a mop. You wrote your own. Proud of you. I laughed for the first time in 2 days and told him about the storage unit, about the way the car looked under the overhead light. I've got that old pickup, he said. If you want a project with your dad, I'll sell it cheap on one condition. You make him do the dirty work. Grease cleans people better than sermons. I said yes before I'd fully thought through why. Some yes fix things you can't fix with words. When the wire receipt from Donovan finally pinged complete in my inbox, I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since the moment I stepped into my parents' doorway. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't relief fully either. It was acknowledgement. The worst version of the story hadn't happened, and the version that did happen had been wrestled back toward fairness. That evening, Heather knocked on my door again with a shoebox. Inside was the bag she'd promised to sell, along with a handwritten note that said, "Please don't let me be the person who only learns when it hurts." I told her we'd list it together and I meant it. Accountability without humiliation. Consequences without exile. It's a thin edge and not everyone can walk it. I'm trying. Some of you will ask why I didn't call the police anyway, why I let the apology and the wire and a notary stamp stand in for handcuffs. The truest answer is that I wanted a family left after the lesson. I wanted a life where Thanksgiving wasn't a negotiating table and where my car could purr in a garage without me listening for betrayals. Justice takes different shapes. This one fit the day. If you've ever had to teach your own people the difference between love and access, tell me in the comments. If you've ever put something you valued into hands that didn't deserve it and had to pull it back, tell me how you did it. And if you want to know what happened next, the therapy, the pickup truck, the promotion text that might change everything again, make sure you're subscribed because part 3 is where the aftermath turns into something like a blueprint. I promise you'll want to see how this ends. The agreement may have closed one chapter, but the story was far from over. For weeks afterward, I felt like I was walking through ruins, silent, scorched remains of something that once pretended to be a family. I told myself I should feel lighter, that the legal papers meant freedom. But every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt the same heaviness in my chest. James was the one who noticed. "You think resolution is the same as healing," he said one evening as we sat in his garage. The stingray glistened under the fluorescent lights, polished to perfection. But healing's messy. It doesn't happen when you sign your name at the bottom of a page. He was right. And I hated that he was right because it meant I still had work to do. Heather's unexpected visit was the first crack of light in that darkness. When she showed up at my door, she wasn't the smug, pampered sister I remembered. Her shoulders were hunched, her designer clothes wrinkled, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I need to talk," she said simply. Inside, she fidgeted on my couch like a guilty child waiting for punishment. The silence stretched until I finally asked, "What do you want from me, Heather?" Her answer shocked me. "I want to learn." I frowned. "Learn what?" "How to be someone like you," she whispered. "Independent. Capable. Not afraid of being alone." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. For years she had been my rival, my tormentor, the chosen one. Now she was confessing weakness. "Do you even know what that means?" I asked coldly. She nodded slowly. "It means I stop running to mom and dad every time life gets hard. It means I actually earn something. I've never even paid my own phone bill, Vanessa. Do you understand how pathetic that feels?" For the first time I did. And against my better judgment I felt pity. "I won't hold your hand," I warned. "I'm not asking you to," she said quickly. "I'm just asking you not to shut the door while I figure it out." The following weeks were a strange blur of contradictions. My parents remained silent, still too ashamed, or too proud, to reach out. Heather, on the other hand, texted constantly. Updates about small things. Cooking her own meals, opening her own bank account, sitting through an interview without Dad's help. One night she called me in tears. "They didn't hire me," she sobbed. "Said I don't have enough experience. Maybe I should just give up." "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to quit because it's hard. That's the point, you push through." Her voice cracked. "Why do you even care? After everything I did to you." I hesitated. Why did I care? Maybe because if Heather could change, then maybe my parents could too. And if they could change, then maybe I wasn't crazy for still wanting a family. "Because I don't want to be the only one in this family who grows up," I said finally. Therapy began as a battlefield. My parents sat stiffly in their chairs, their words clipped, defensive. But with each session something shifted. The counselor forced them to listen, really listen, as I laid out years of hurt. "You made me invisible," I said once, staring at my father. "Every accomplishment, every sacrifice. I was punished for being strong because it was easier for you to lean on weakness." He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I thought you didn't need me. And that excused abandoning me?" I snapped. His shoulders sagged. "No. It was cowardice. And I'm sorry." The apology didn't erase the years, but it mattered. For the first time I felt like he saw me. My mother's breakthroughs were slower, but they came. She admitted she had weaponized fragility, that tears were easier than accountability. I thought if I cried you'd forgive me quicker, she whispered. But all it did was push you further away. Heather joined the third session. She spoke with a bluntness I had never heard from her before. I was addicted to being the favorite, she said. But favorites don't grow. They rot. And I'm rotting. She looked at me then, her eyes wet. I don't want to rot anymore. Something inside me cracked open. For years I had prayed she'd say words like that. Hearing them didn't erase the past, but it gave me hope for the future. Meanwhile, James and I grew closer. Nights in his garage became therapy of a different kind. We laughed, we argued, we dreamed. Working side by side on the Stingray wasn't just about metal and grease. It was about trust. One evening, after hours of sanding and tuning, he handed me a set of keys. You know, he said, this car's yours as much as mine now. I shook my head. No, James. It's yours. He smiled softly. Then so are you. The words terrified me. Because love was risk, and risk meant vulnerability. But maybe vulnerability wasn't weakness after all. Months later, Heather finally landed a job, an entry-level position at a marketing firm. She called me, her voice trembling with pride. It's not glamorous, she said. But it's mine. I got it myself. I grinned through tears. That's all that matters. She paused. Vanessa, I don't deserve your forgiveness. But thank you for giving me a chance anyway. For the first time I believed she meant it. The real test came when my parents invited me to dinner. I almost didn't go. But James squeezed my hand and said, you don't have to forgive them. You just have to see who they are now. So I went. The dinner was awkward, quiet, heavy with unspoken words. But halfway through my father cleared his throat. We're proud of you, he said. We never said it enough. Maybe never at all. But we are. Tears stung my eyes. It was late, too late, but it was something. And sometimes something is enough. One weekend, James and I took the Stingray on a road trip up the coast. The roar of the engine echoed against the cliffs, the ocean stretching endlessly beside us. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire, I realized something profound. I wasn't running anymore. Not from betrayal, not from loneliness, not from the desperate need for approval. I had built my own road. My own life. My own family. With James, with friends who had shown up when blood hadn't, and maybe, just maybe, with relatives who were learning to change. When I think back on everything, the lies, the betrayals, the nights I cried alone, it doesn't feel like a tragedy anymore. It feels like a rebirth. Because sometimes family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who grows with you, who fights to change, who proves that love isn't measured in favoritism or money or stolen cars, but in respect. And if you're sitting here watching this, wondering if you'll ever heal from your own betrayals, let my story be proof. You can. You can survive the wreckage. You can set boundaries and still keep your heart open. You can demand better, and sometimes people will rise to meet that demand. So tell me in the comments, what's your story of survival? Of betrayal, of healing, of choosing yourself? Share it below because someone else might need to hear it. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and come back. More stories are waiting. Stories that will remind you that no matter how broken the past, the future can still shine.